When the Galactic Council first cataloged humanity, they filed us away under Class 7 Predator. A bit of a nuisance, sure, but nothing their thousand-year empire couldn't handle. They saw a bunch of upright apes, clever enough to build cities but foolish enough to wage war over invisible lines on a map. They thought they had our number, but they were about to learn a terrifying lesson. Because the Council missed one critical detail in their report. We weren't just predators. We were the things that hunted other predators for fun. Stick around because you're about to find out what happens when the galaxy's biggest bullies knock on the wrong door. You see, while other species evolved from timid plant eaters who learned to fight back, humanity came from relentless persistence hunters who saw giving up as a foreign concept. We are a species of pack strategists who turned warfare into a science, and creative problem solvers who view an impossible obstacle as a fun puzzle. The Council thought our armies were our greatest weapon. That was their first big mistake. Their second was not understanding what a human meant by the phrase just for the thrill of it. And their final, fatal error, believing that a species who picks fights with 800-pound grizzly bears for recreation would ever be intimidated by aliens in shiny ships. This is the story of how the universe discovered there are predators. And then there is humanity. The war room aboard the Zephyrian flagship hummed with quiet confidence, the kind you get after conquering 47 star systems without breaking a sweat. Admiral Kether, a towering four-armed reptilian, scowled at the holographic image of Earth. He'd brought dozens of worlds to their knees, and this one looked like it was going to be a total bore. "Another Class 7, he hissed to his tactical officer, Commander HFY. "Honestly, are they ever going to give us a real fight? What kind of threat could these humans possibly be to an entire battle fleet?" HFY tapped on her data pad, her bright yellow eyes scanning the preliminary reports. "Initial scans show a fairly typical aggressive primate, Admiral," she said smoothly. "Bipedal, tool users, and divided into squabbling tribes they call nations. They've barely mastered spaceflight and have some primitive atomic weapons, but their technology is roughly 800 years behind our own." 800 years, Cathar echoed, a grin revealing his rows of needle-sharp teeth. "And their population? About 8 billion packed onto their single world and a handful of flimsy orbital platforms. Their largest armies number in the low millions at best. Standard pacification procedures will be more than enough." The Admiral nodded, already composing his victory speech in his head. This was going to be another routine integration into the glorious empire. One more backward species subdued by technology so advanced it might as well be magic. The Zephyrian method had worked flawlessly for 3 centuries, and he couldn't imagine these humans would be any different. "And their culture?" he asked, more out of habit than genuine curiosity. HFY's scaly crest on her head flattened slightly, a subconscious signal of confusion. "That is where the intelligence reports get a little strange, Admiral. Our sociologists are having trouble modeling their behavior." "Explain." "Well, sir, most Class 7 species are predictable. They're territorial. They fight for resources, but they always back down when faced with overwhelming force. It's a basic survival instinct." She paused, glancing back at her screen. "Humans, on the other hand, have certain tendencies that don't align with any known predator model. Kether was intrigued now, despite himself. Like what? They practice something called recreational combat. It isn't for mates or for territory, Admiral. It's organized violence performed solely for entertainment. They call it boxing and mixed martial arts. They voluntarily enter a cage to injure one another while massive crowds cheer. The Admiral waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Plenty of species enjoy ceremonial combat. The Thurok fighting pits are renowned across the galaxy. Yes, sir, but the Thurok use it to establish social dominance. This human activity serves no evolutionary purpose. They just seem to enjoy it. Odd, but hardly a threat. What else? HFY's crest lowered even more. They also engage in extreme sports, deliberately life-threatening activities with no practical goal. They jump off enormous structures with only an elastic cord to stop their fall. They climb sheer ice cliffs for fun, and they intentionally seek out dangerous animals just for what they call a rush. Animals? Kether's voice grew sharp. What kind of animal on their own planet could possibly pose a threat to a sentient species? That's just it, Admiral. Our surveys indicate that Earth is teeming with massive predators that humans should be actively avoiding. We're talking about creatures weighing several times more than they do, armed with powerful claws and teeth, living in environments where a bipedal ape has every disadvantage. She swiped the display on her tablet. And yet, humans seek them out. Not for food, they have agriculture. Not for territory, they have plenty of safe zones. They hunt these apex predators. For sport. A cold feeling began to coil in one of Kethar's 2 stomachs. Define hunt for sport. They track and kill these alpha predators using primitive firearms and even sharpened sticks. And sometimes they don't even kill them. They will capture creatures weighing hundreds of kilograms using only their bare hands and then release them. They have a term for it when they do it in water. Noodling. And on land they call it wrangling. The Admiral stared at the spinning blue and green orb that was Earth, which suddenly seemed far less inviting. What kind of apex predators are we discussing, Commander? HFY's claws made a faint clicking sound against her tablet. Ursids, giant omnivores capable of crushing a human skull with a single swipe. Humans track them through mountains and defeat them. Crocodilians? Armored killing machines that have remained unchanged for millions of years because they are already perfect. Humans wrestle them. And then you have the giant felines, weighing up to 300 kilograms that can leap 10 meters and possess claws like surgical steel. Humans hunt those with bows and arrows. Bows and arrows? Kether repeated, the phrase feeling bizarre on his tongue. They hunt 300-kilogram super predators. With sharpened sticks? Yes, sir. And according to our intelligence, they consider this a fun way to spend a weekend. The war room fell utterly silent. Admiral Kether had faced down hive minds and warrior clans, but a species that wrestled monsters to relax, that felt profoundly, fundamentally wrong. Maybe, he suggested, grasping for a logical foothold, these are just their most elite soldiers, their specially trained shock troops. HFY's crest was now completely flat against her skull. No, sir. Our data indicates this is a widespread recreational hobby. Their communication networks are filled with images of ordinary individuals, including their young and elderly, participating. They have entire television series dedicated to people who go out of their way to get close to creatures that could end their lives in a heartbeat. Show me. The hologram shimmered, then resolved into a series of human video clips. Admiral Kethar watched as a pit of dread opened in his gut. An elderly human with white hair was holding a thrashing, 300-kilogram reptile perfectly still while casually explaining its anatomy to a camera. A young female was swimming alongside massive ocean predators, pointing to their rows of serrated teeth for what appeared to be an educational program. "By the 7 moons," HFY whispered, horrified. "Look at this one." The screen now showed a human male standing directly in the path of a stampede of horned beasts, each weighing thousands of pounds. Instead of fleeing, the human simply waited until the last possible moment to sidestep the charging animal as a crowd of thousands erupted in cheers. "They call this bull running," HFY said, her voice shaking. "It's part of a festival. Hundreds of them willingly place themselves in the path of a deadly stampede for celebration." Admiral Kethar stared at the screen, feeling as if the floor had just vanished from beneath him. They hadn't just misunderstood humanity, they had fundamentally miscalculated the nature of life itself. "Commander," he said, his voice a dry rasp, "what is our psychological profile on this species?" "It's inconclusive, sir. One faction believes humans possess a collective death wish. The other believes their home world was so hostile for so long that what we perceive as suicidal recklessness is what they consider a normal Tuesday." "There is a third, more radical theory, sir," HFY added, hesitating, "that we have made a grave error in our classification, that humans aren't a Class 7 predator at all." The Admiral's 4 hands clenched into tight fists. "Then what are they?" "They're calling them a Class 1 apex event, Admiral. A species that has evolved beyond the predator-prey relationship entirely." "Explain," Kethar demanded. "Well, sir, every predator in the known universe hunts what is weaker than itself. It is the fundamental law of survival. But humans actively seek out things that are bigger, stronger, and deadlier. They don't do it for food or safety. They do it to prove that they can. Imagine being so powerful, so arrogant, that you misjudge an entire species and doom your whole empire. That's exactly what happened to Admiral Keth when he stared at the little blue marble called Earth. His chief analyst, Yax, was practically trembling. "Sir," he said, "they hunt other predators. For fun. We're calling it metapredation. It's not about food or territory. It's a game to them, a psychological thrill." Yax lowered his voice. "Admiral, think about what that means. A species that seeks out danger as a hobby. What if they don't see our invasion as a threat? What if they see it as the ultimate hunt? If you think you know how this story ends, stick around, because you are in for a surprise." For a full minute, Admiral Kethvar didn't say a word. The Zephyrian Empire was the boogeyman of the galaxy. They didn't do long drawn-out wars. They did lightning-fast conquests. The idea of an enemy that might actually enjoy fighting back was unsettling. "Commander," he finally said, his voice tight, "I want every scrap of data you can find on this species. their military, their culture, everything. Send it to the council, top priority. Are we postponing the invasion, sir? Yex asked, a hint of hope in his voice. Kethvar's entire career was built on bold, decisive victories. Showing hesitation now would be political suicide. Something about this planet felt off, but he couldn't back down. No, he snapped. We proceed as planned, but increase the invasion force by 30%. Yes, sir. And Commander, Kethvar added, our first appearance needs to be overwhelming. If these humans think war is a game, we'll show them from the start that it's a game they have absolutely no chance of winning. But here's the thing they didn't know. Their intel had a massive blind spot. They'd been watching civilians, hunters, extreme athletes, thrill seekers, and that was enough to make their scientists nervous. What they hadn't seen was the United States military. A war machine forged in the fires of global conflicts for over 200 years. They hadn't analyzed the psychological profiles of the men and women who volunteer for the most dangerous missions on the planet. They hadn't studied the war-fighting doctrine of a nation that had perfected the art of projecting overwhelming power anywhere in the world. And they definitely didn't understand that for some of these humans, hunting wasn't just a hobby with a rifle. It involved billion-dollar satellites, stealth bombers, and entire armies. The Zephyrians thought they were about to steamroll a planet of amateur hunters. They were about to find out what happens when those amateurs grow up to become professional soldiers in the most powerful military their world had ever seen. As Admiral Kethvar gave the final command to approach Earth, he was absolutely certain that his superior technology would terrify this strange little species into submission. It was the last moment of pure confidence his people would feel for a very, very long time. Meanwhile, deep in the Montana wilderness, Colonel Jake Morrison was field dressing an 8-point buck when his satellite phone let out a screech. It was the one signal he hoped he'd never hear. He froze, knife in hand, and glanced at the screen. Code black. All personnel. Immediate return to base. This is not a drill. For 3 years, ever since the deep space monitors started picking up weird signals beyond Pluto, he'd been waiting for this call. Officially, the Pentagon called it unidentified stellar phenomena, but everyone with top-secret clearance knew what it really was. Someone was coming, and they weren't coming in peace. Morrison wiped his blade on his camo pants, giving the deer a final regretful look. 6 years of hunting in these mountains had taught him patience, precision, and the art of the perfect shot, skills that had saved his life in Afghanistan, Iraq, and a dozen other places you'll never see on the news. It looked like that training was about to be tested on a whole new level. He keyed his comms. Hunter 6 to base. I copy code black. On my way. ETA 2 hours. The reply was instant and chilling. Hunter 6, be advised we have bogeys over major cities. I repeat, this is happening now. Morrison instinctively raised his rifle, scanning the vast Montana sky through his scope. It looked perfectly clear, but he knew better. If you have the technology to cross the galaxy, you've probably got some decent cloaking. He shouldered his pack, grabbed his gear, and started the long hike back to his truck, his mind already flipping into combat mode. 15 years in Army Special Forces, the last 5 commanding the Pentagon's most secretive unit. Its official name was the Joint Asymmetric Warfare Group. Unofficially, everyone just called them the Hunter Teams. Their one and only job was to figure out how to fight and win against a technologically superior enemy. Morrison couldn't help but crack a smile at the irony. His weekend hobby might just be the perfect training for humanity's first interstellar war. Thousands of miles above him, Admiral Keth Var stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Stellar Dominance. His fleet of 47 ships had slipped into orbit completely undetected. It was flawless. "Reveal the intimidation platforms over their largest population centers," he ordered. "I want every last human on that planet to look up and understand true power." As Commander Yex complied, the skies over New York, London, Tokyo, and 30 other cities warped like a heat haze. Then, colossal alien warships materialized from thin air. Each one was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and pulsing with an ominous blue energy. "Now," Kethvar said with a smug grin, "broadcast the standard ultimatum on all their channels. Make it perfectly clear. Surrender, or we turn their planet to glass." Within seconds, every TV, radio, and phone on Earth was hijacked. The message was simple. Humanity had been judged by a galactic council and found too dangerous to exist. They had 24 hours to surrender unconditionally or face total annihilation. What Admiral Kethvar couldn't possibly know was that deep inside the Cheyenne Mountain complex, the United States military had been planning for this exact day since 1947. General Patricia Hayes watched the alien broadcast, her expression unreadable. For decades, politicians had called her alien invasion protocols a waste of money. Today, she was about to save the world. "Execute Protocol 7, she commanded, her voice as calm as a frozen lake. "All units, all theaters, this is not a drill." All across the country, military bases that had been secretly preparing for this moment roared to life. Weapons that technically didn't exist were powered up. Soldiers trained in scenarios straight out of science fiction were mobilized. And in a dozen hidden locations, the men and women who hunted the most dangerous game on Earth received their new orders. By the time Colonel Morrison screeched onto the tarmac at Fort Bragg, the base was already a beehive of activity. The hunter teams were being activated. The hunter teams were America's secret weapon. We're talking the absolute best of the best, drawn from SEAL Team 6 Delta Force, Marine Recon, 12 teams of 30 operators each. These were the guys whose files were so classified, their own families thought they worked in IT. General Hayes's face appeared on the giant screen in the briefing room. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice like gravel, "you've spent your whole careers fighting outnumbered and outgunned. Well, today's the day we find out just how good you really are." The briefing was grim. Orbital weapons, energy shields, faster than light ships. The aliens could wipe them out with the push of a button. "But they have a weakness," Hayes continued. "Their entire strategy is based on shock and awe. They expect us to meet them on an open battlefield where their tech gives them the advantage. They're ready for our tanks and jets. What they are not ready for is you." Morrison looked at the schematics of the alien ships. Fighting them head-on was suicide, but he knew something about hunting. You don't charge a grizzly bear head-on. You learn its habits, you find its weaknesses, and you wait for the perfect moment to strike. It taught you patience and persistence, how to anticipate your prey's every move. Most of all,
It gave you the unshakable belief that no matter how big or deadly something is, everything has a weak spot. "What's the clock look like, General?" Colonel Morrison asked. "They've given us 24 hours to hand over the planet," General Hayes replied, her voice tight. "Our analysts think they'll start with a few warning shots on military sites to break our spirit. They want the planet in one piece, which means sooner or later they have to come down here and take it." Morrison gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Exactly. And when they land, they're about to learn that the apex predators on this world aren't the ones sitting behind desks." For the first time since the code black alarm had shrieked through the command center, a grim smile touched Morrison's lips. "They're the ones hiding in our mountains and our swamps, with a hunting rifle and 2 decades of experience." 6 hours after the deadline expired, the first alien ships broke through the clouds. From the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kavar observed the complete lack of a response to his generous offer. It was unusual, but not entirely unexpected. Some primitive cultures needed a small demonstration of power to accept their new reality. His landing craft were massive, armored brutes designed to deliver Zephyrian shock troops directly into the enemy's heart. Each one carried 300 soldiers equipped with plasma rifles, personal energy shields, and powered armor that made them all but immune to human weapons. They descended on high-value targets across the planet, the Pentagon, NORAD, and other key military installations. The plan was brutally simple: a quick, clean strike to remove the head of the human command structure. It was a standard-issue strategy for bringing a Class 7 predator species into the fold of the Empire. What the Zephyrians failed to grasp was that America's true command and control centers had been buried miles underground for decades, and every one of those surface-level bases was guarded by weapon systems that had been engineered to destroy threats they couldn't possibly imagine. The first lander screamed toward the Pentagon, but it never even scorched the grass. A directed energy weapon that officially didn't exist turned the entire ship into a cloud of incandescent vapor in under 3 seconds. A second landing craft vanished in another silent, brilliant burst of light, then a third. Aboard his ship, Admiral Kavar stared at his tactical display in stunned disbelief, as his elite forces were simply wiped off the map. The human defenses were exponentially more powerful than his intelligence reports had indicated. "Intensify the orbital bombardment," he bellowed. "Full sterilization protocols on all identified military targets." The Zephyrian fleet opened up with its main cannons, and lances of pure energy scoured the planet's surface. Bases, bunkers, and communication arrays were vaporized in flashes of light so intense they could be seen from orbit. But deep within the mountains of Montana, Colonel Morrison received the signal he'd been waiting for. It was time for Phase 2. The aliens had revealed their tactics, their weapons, and their playbook. Now it was time for them to get a lesson in American hunting. For the past 8 hours, Morrison's team had been silent phantoms in the Absaroka Range. Their equipment wasn't military issue, it was custom-made for a single purpose, built on a simple truth: everything dies if you hit it in the right place. Hard enough. The first alien patrol crunched into the valley at 0347, moving through the dense forest like they owned it. 12 Zephyrian soldiers, decked out in gleaming power armor, their plasma rifles scanning the darkness,
itching for a fight. They never saw the real danger. The soldier on point dropped without making a sound. Sergeant Rodriguez had sent a .50 caliber tungsten round straight through the tiny seam where the helmet connected to the chest plate. Moving at 4,000 feet per second, the bullet punched through the alien alloy as if it were tissue paper. The second alien was vaporized in a blinding flash when Corporal Washington detonated a remote charge, a nasty little surprise inspired by old-fashioned grizzly bear traps. The principle was simple. If you want to stop something big and angry, you hit it with enough force to make sure it never gets up again. The 10 remaining aliens scrambled for cover, firing their energy weapons wildly into the woods. But Morrison's team was already gone, melting back into the terrain they knew better than their own homes. They operated with skills sharpened by years of tracking animals that would kill you for making a single mistake. Master Sergeant Chen drew back an arrow and took down the third alien with a custom-made recurve bow, using a broadhead tip designed to pierce light armor. From a sniper's perch the aliens could never hope to spot, Staff Sergeant Kim eliminated the fourth with a crossbow bolt. By the time the alien patrol realized they were being systematically taken apart by an unseen enemy using what looked like ancient relics, only 3 of them remained. They frantically called for extraction, but Colonel Morrison's team was already fading into the shadows, setting up their next ambush and waiting for the rescue party. Because that's how a true hunter operates. You don't just take down your target. You use it as bait to lure in something even bigger. Miles above the planet, Admiral Kavar stared at his displays in absolute horror. His ground teams were disappearing without a trace. His cutting-edge landing craft were being destroyed by weapons that weren't supposed to exist. And now, his encrypted communications were being completely jammed by human technology that his own scientists had dismissed as being 8 centuries out of date. "Sir," his second-in-command HFY reported, his voice shaking, "we are receiving a transmission. It's from the human high command. They are requesting to parley." "Parley?" Kavar's voice was a mixture of fury and bewilderment. "They wish to surrender?" "No, sir. The translation indicates they want to discuss the rules of engagement." Admiral Kavar had brought 47 star systems to heel. He had crushed warrior races, outwitted hive minds, and shattered civilizations that fought with desperate fury. But never, not in a single campaign, had an enemy asked to discuss the rules of engagement while their world was actively being turned to glass. "Put her on screen," he snarled. The holographic display shimmered into existence, revealing a human woman in a simple military uniform. Her expression was calm, businesslike, and utterly without fear, which was completely illogical given her situation. "Admiral Kavar," she stated, her pronunciation flawless. "My name is General Patricia Hayes of the United States Strategic Command. I'm contacting you to inform you that your soldiers have made contact with American military forces. We have certain traditions when it comes to war that you should be aware of." "You are in no position to make demands of any kind, General," Kavar growled. "I'm not making demands, Admiral. I'm offering some friendly advice that might shed some light on what's happening to your invasion force down there." Kavar's 4 hands clenched into tight fists. "Explain yourself." For over 300 years, Americans have hunted the largest, most dangerous predators on this continent for sport. We've perfected the equipment, we've sharpened the techniques, and we've passed that knowledge down through generations of soldiers who view combat as the ultimate hunt. Your troops just stumbled into the personal hunting grounds of men and women who track and kill things like them for fun.
Your weapons are nothing but sticks and stones compared to our might, General.
Your technology is very impressive, General Hayes acknowledged smoothly. But our technology was built to kill things we can't see or even imagine. You might be familiar with the simple human deer rifle, Admiral. What you probably don't know is that for 70 years, we've been modifying them to punch through armor that hasn't even been invented yet. A cold knot of dread began to form in Admiral Kavar's stomach. You've been preparing for us. Admiral, she said, and for the first time a faint smile played on her lips. America has been preparing for this day since 1947. We've had over 70 years to wonder what we would do if someone like you ever knocked on our door. We've run every simulation, designed every countermeasure, and trained every soldier for this exact moment. The tactical map flared red again as another shuttle simply ceased to exist just before the Admiral lost contact with 3 more ground patrols simultaneously. General Hayes leaned forward slightly. "You need to understand something, Admiral," she said, her smile widening into something cold and sharp. "The soldiers you're fighting right now? That's our professional army. The ones using equipment built by the lowest bidder, but in about 6 hours." And it was in that instant Admiral Kavar remembered why his xenobiologists had filed 7 separate warnings about ground invasions of Earth. Hunting season opens in 37 states. That's when we let the civilians join the party. Regular Americans who have spent their entire lives tracking game through the wilderness just for the thrill of it. These are men and women with rifles that can drop a grizzly bear from the next county over. They know every rock, every creek, and every shadow in our forests, and you just handed them the biggest hunt in human history. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kavar staring at a blank screen while his tactical display lit up like a Christmas tree, signaling the complete and utter annihilation of every Zephyrian soldier on the planet. For the first time in his decorated career, it occurred to him that overwhelming technological superiority meant absolutely nothing against a species that evolved by hunting things bigger, stronger, and meaner than they were. And the most terrifying part? He hadn't even met the amateurs yet. For 4 long days, Bobby Clearwater had been stalking a monster bull elk across the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho when the aliens showed up. He was a good 12 miles from anything you could call a road, carrying his great-granddaddy's 306, a pack with just enough to survive, and a quiet patience carved from 30 years in the wild. When his satellite phone buzzed with an alert, he almost swatted it away. But then 2 words cut through the static: alien invasion. The message called on all licensed hunters to report to local authorities. A huge grin cracked across Bobby's weathered face, the first real smile he'd had since his grandson bagged his first buck. He'd been waiting for a day like this his whole life. People like Bobby were what a few sharp minds in the military called America's ace in the hole. He was one of 12 million licensed hunters, who together owned something like 300 million firearms. These weren't soldiers. They were your neighbors,
The plumbers, teachers, mechanics, and accountants who could hit a target the size of a quarter from 300 yards away in a snowstorm. They were farmers who could track a wounded coyote for 50 miles through thick brush and end it with a single clean shot. Above all, they were Americans, raised on family stories of granddads in fishing boats, hunting German U-boats, and great-granddads using their deer rifles to fight off cavalry. So when the government's call went out for hunters to help fight off an alien invasion, it was a message they understood down to their bones. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 6 hours of that broadcast, you couldn't find a single box of ammunition in any sporting goods store from coast to coast. Local gun ranges became makeshift command centers where Army recruiters gave lightning-fast lessons on Zephyrian armor and the best way to punch a hole in it with a hunting rifle. YouTube was flooded with viral videos on how to rig a scope to track a fast-moving alien ship. But the real work was happening on old-school channels, hunting clubs, conservation groups, and circles of buddies who knew every game trail in Hidden Valley in their own backyards. These were people who had been organizing deer drives for generations, who could coordinate dozens of folks across miles of rugged terrain with nothing but cheap walkie-talkies and hand signals. The Pentagon had spent billions planning for a national resistance force in case of an invasion. It turned out that resistance force was already there. It was just usually busy chasing whitetail, not aliens. From his command ship, Admiral Keithfar was starting to realize his species had made a terrible, terrible mistake. Their intelligence reports had dismissed these primitive guns as irrelevant, but they weren't just weapons. They were precision instruments for a kind of warfare their computers had never even imagined. "Report," he snapped. He barked the word the second commander HFY entered the bridge. "Admiral, we've lost contact with 80% of our ground teams," she said, her head crest lying flat in a gesture of pure panic. "The humans are using some kind of guerrilla warfare, a coordinated harassment that is simply wiping our patrols off the map." "How is that possible?" Keithfar demanded. "Our soldiers have powered armor, energy shields, sensors that can spot a mouse twitching from a kilometer away." "That's the issue, sir," HFY stammered. "They aren't fighting us directly. They're using a blend of siege and ambush tactics. Our troops enter an area and they just disappear." "Explain," the Admiral ordered. "Sir," she said, her voice dropping, "the humans aren't fighting our soldiers. They're hunting them, as if they were nothing more than animals." Keithfar stared at the tactical map, at the sea of blinking red dots that marked where his forces had vanished. Once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The pattern was a classic hunter's trap, brilliantly adapted to take down a technologically superior enemy. At that same moment, high in the Colorado mountains, a Zephyrian squad leader named Vashkal was learning a hard lesson about why humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of the hunt. His squad of 12 was supposed to secure a simple communications tower. It should have taken 2 hours, tops. That was 3 days ago. Now they were lost. Every time they tried to advance, phantom shots would ring out from miles away, forcing them to take cover. Firing their plasma cannons into the trees revealed nothing but scorched earth and empty space. Their motion detectors would catch a brief flicker, but it would be gone by the time they turned to look. Their powered armor, engineered to be nearly indestructible,
was totally worthless against an enemy that just wouldn't stand and fight. "Squad leader," one of his troopers reported, "power cells are at 40%. These humans have kept us on maximum alert, running our sensors full blast for 72 hours straight." Vashkol recognized the strategy. It was what prey did, stayed just out of reach, forcing the predator to waste all its energy in the chase until it was too tired to fight. Except humans were supposed to be the prey here, not the predators. "Movement!" the sensor tech shouted. "Bearing 270! Single target, about 800 meters out!" Vashkol raised his energy rifle, his suit's targeting system locking on instantly. The display showed a single human, just walking through the trees like he didn't have a care in the world. "This is too easy," another trooper grumbled. "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Vashkol hissed back. "But if we don't take the bait, our batteries will be dead in 12 hours. What Vashkol couldn't know was that he was being hunted by a man named Eddie Ramirez, a retired Army sniper who had hunted men for 15 years professionally and then hunted elk for 20 years to calm his nerves. For the last 6 hours, Eddie had been watching this alien squad, memorizing their patrol routes, studying their equipment, and timing their every reaction. More importantly, Eddie was on the radio with 17 other hunters spread out across the mountain, setting up what their grandfathers would have called a classic deer drive, a perfectly timed maneuver designed to funnel their prey into a pre-planned kill zone. The lone human Vashkol was seeing was Eddie's friend, Frank Kowalski, a retired Marine who was masterfully leading the aliens into a natural bottleneck, a place where the terrain itself would trap them and turn them into easy targets. "Bait is set," Frank's voice crackled over the radio. "They're on the trail. ETA to the kill box is 10 minutes. A small smile touched Eddie's lips as he made a tiny adjustment to his rifle scope. Frank was using the same tactics they used on elk, and elk were faster, stronger, and had far better senses than these clanking aliens. The only real difference was that elk didn't fire back with plasma cannons. But on the other hand, elk didn't have the one critical weakness Eddie had discovered in the Zephyrian battle armor. The aliens had designed their suits for a full frontal assault, assuming any enemy would hammer away at their strongest points with the biggest weapons they had. They never once considered an enemy who would just watch them for days on end, patiently searching for one tiny, almost invisible flaw. After observing the alien patrols for 3 days straight, Eddie found it. The power pack for their shields and sensors was located in a small housing right at the base of the neck. It was heavily armored, no doubt, but whenever they turned their heads a certain way, the armor plates would shift for a split second, exposing a gap about 2 inches wide. It was a window that lasted less than 1/10 of a second, but for a man like Eddie, who'd spent his life making impossible shots, it was more than enough time. "Target acquired," he whispered into his mic as the first alien stepped into view. "Okay, boys, weapons hot, fire on my mark." In that final sinking moment, squad leader Vashkol knew he'd been completely outplayed. The humans had herded them exactly where they wanted them. The steep canyon walls formed a perfect kill box with no escape, and his motion sensors suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree, screaming with targets from a dozen different directions. "It's an ambush!" he roared, but as he raised his rifle, a terrible truth hit him. All your fancy technology means nothing when your enemy gets to choose the time, the place, and the terms of the fight. At that exact instant, Eddie Ramirez squeezed his trigger just as 17 other hunters fired their rifles from hidden positions all across the valley. 18 custom-loaded hunting rounds designed to pierce tank armor, all fired at once, striking the exact same weak spot on 18 different suits of Zephyrian armor. Squad leader Vashkal was gone before he could even process how a bunch of so-called primitives had found the one fatal flaw in armor tested against every weapon known to the galactic community. He also never learned that the people who took him out weren't elite soldiers. They were a retired accountant, 2 plumbers, a high school science teacher, 3 ranchers, and 11 other ordinary folks whose greatest skill was tracking big game through the wilderness and taking it down with one perfect shot. And most importantly, Vashkal never got the chance to warn Admiral Keithvar that human hunting was a form of warfare their species was totally and fatally unprepared for. The only message the Admiral ever received was short, simple, and utterly chilling. Squad 7 Alpha has gone dark. All their calls went into the void, unanswered. By the time Admiral Keithvar realized he was losing the ground war, it was already over. The humans had somehow discovered every single flaw in Zephyrian technology and were dismantling his forces, unit by unit. They were using tactics that felt like they were pulled from an ancient history book, but armed with 21st century firepower. And the scariest part? They were getting smarter. Every single skirmish taught them more about the alien strategies. Every piece of alien tech they captured was immediately reverse-engineered by their mechanics to create a counter. Every winning move was instantly shared with other hunter squads, who then adapted it to their own unique battlefields. The humans weren't just defending their home. They were treating this invasion like the ultimate big-game hunt, complete with a deep-dive analysis of their new prey and constantly improving their methods. "Sir," Commander Yakshi said during the Admiral's morning update, "we've been listening to some of the human military chatter. It's strange." "Define strange, Commander." "Well, sir, they're talking about our invasion, but they're using words you'd expect to hear from someone on a fishing trip. Phrases like bag limits, hunting tags, and even a trophy scoring system." Admiral Keithvar felt a cold knot form in all 4 of his stomachs. "They're turning this into a sport." "That's one way to put it, Admiral." "They've established quotas on how much of our gear can be salvaged. They're scoring points based on the difficulty of the fight, and they've even set up hunting regulations to ensure the salvaged alien tech is distributed fairly among all the different hunting groups. They've turned our invasion into a contest." "Yes, sir. And according to our intel, the number of players is growing. We have confirmation that human hunters are traveling from across the entire continent just to get in on what they're calling the Great Hunt." Admiral Keithvar could only stare at the tactical map of Earth. The red dots that marked his ground troops were blinking out one after another. The map was now a sea of blue markers for confirmed human-resistant cells and green markers for zones where his state-of-the-art equipment had been captured, likely already in pieces in some human workshop. The entire map was practically solid blue and green. "Commander," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "draft a message for the Galactic Council. Mark it as highest priority." "Sir?" "Tell them we have encountered a species that defies all known classifications. Request an emergency summit with xenobiologists and strategists who specialize in unconventional warfare." Should I include our loss count, sir? Admiral Kethvar glanced at the fresh report. In just 72 hours, the Zephyrian military had lost more soldiers to these human hunters than in the last 100 years of galactic conquest combined. Yes, Commander. Include the casualty report and make it perfectly clear to the Council that we are not fighting a conventional army. We are being systematically dismantled by a civilian population that considers our invasion a fun outdoor activity. As Commander Yaksashi hurried off, Admiral Kethvar turned back to the map. Down on that planet, millions of humans with rifles were dreaming up new ways to track and eliminate his soldiers. They were learning, adapting, and improving with every single battle. For the first time in his decorated career, Admiral Kethvar was beginning to understand that all the technology in the galaxy is worthless against an enemy that just refuses to play by the rules. And from the sound of it, the humans were just getting started. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the brilliant crystal halls of the station orbiting Nexus Prime. Holograms of representatives from 43 different species materialized in their seats. Admiral Kethvar stood before them, his posture rigid and formal, an officer reporting from a losing battle. What he was about to say would completely upend everything the galaxy's most advanced civilizations thought they knew about war. "Honored counselors," he began, his voice steady despite the chaos, "the Zephyrian Empire is officially requesting an immediate reclassification of the human species and a halt to all contact until a full strategic review can be completed." A profound silence blanketed the chamber, broken only by Counselor F. Marie of the Crystalline Collective, a being whose silicon brain had analyzed cosmic warfare for over 2,000 years. "Admiral Kethvar, your report alleges that a Class 7 predator species, using primitive kinetic weapons, has repelled an invasion by a military that has successfully conquered 47 star systems. This seems improbable." "With all due respect, Counselor, our classification system is completely and utterly wrong about humans," Kethvar countered, projecting a hologram of Earth. "We classified them as Class 7 predators based on our standard metrics, but we failed to comprehend that humans are something far outside our established framework." Counselor Vexal of the Hive Mind Imperium leaned forward, her thousand-lensed eyes glittering. "Explain this mistake, Admiral. Your reconnaissance missions followed every standard protocol. Our protocols judge a species by how they hunt their natural food source," Kethvar explained. "Humans hunt herbivores on their world with clever tactics and projectile weapons. This led us to label them as a standard tool-using predator. That was our fatal error." "And the error was?" "The error, Counselor, was assuming that hunting for food was the pinnacle of their predatory skill. We have now learned to our great cost that humans have turned hunting into a recreational activity, and for sport they hunt other apex predators. They deliberately seek out the most dangerous creatures on their own planet and engage them using methods specifically chosen to make the encounter as challenging and risky as possible." The arachnid ambassador's translator began to click furiously, a clear sign of utter bewilderment. Such behavior suggests a deep-seated cognitive flaw.
A species incapable of proper risk assessment rarely achieves space travel. That's precisely what our analysts thought, Ambassador. But we now realize their risk assessment isn't flawed at all. They are consciously choosing to ignore it because their brains are hardwired with a reward system that gives them profound satisfaction from overcoming increasingly difficult challenges. Counselor F. Case Marie's crystalline form pulsed with light, a sign of rapid calculation. You are describing a species that hunts not for survival, but for psychological gratification. Exactly. And when our invasion force arrived, offering them the ultimate challenge, an armed conflict against a technologically superior alien race, they didn't respond with fear. They responded with pure excitement. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of 43 different species expressing their disbelief. Counselor Vexal silenced the room with a gesture. Admiral, are you suggesting the humans perceive your invasion as a form of entertainment? I'm stating, Counselor, that the humans have organized their entire resistance based on the models of their recreational hunting clubs, communication networks, and the management systems of a worldwide sporting event. They've established scoring systems for captured alien hardware. They've divided our invasion zones into hunting territories to ensure everyone gets a fair shot, and they've even instituted bag limits to prevent any single group from harvesting too many Zephyrian targets. The hologram shifted to a tactical map of the human resistance. Red lines traced their flanking maneuvers. Blue dots marked their rally points, and green zones showed where they had successfully ambushed his troops. Even worse, Kethvar continued, they are adapting their hunting techniques at a horrifying rate. Our initial engagements lasted several hours as they learned our tactics. Now, the average firefight is over in less than 12 minutes, from the opening shot to the total annihilation of our ground squads. For 12 excruciating minutes, Counselor Mari listened as the Admiral laid out a war against an enemy that should have been nothing more than a footnote. These humans were facing an army with technology so advanced it was designed for conflicts the Council couldn't even fathom. But they refused to play by those rules. They didn't try to build bigger ships or better lasers. Instead, they found the tiny seams in a perfect war machine and used simple primitive tools to tear it apart. You won't believe how a species we dismissed as backward brought an entire galactic empire to its knees. The arachnid ambassador's clicking became a frantic rattle. Show us, Admiral. We need to see these tactics. On the main view screen, helmet cam footage flared to life, showing the final terrifying moments of alien soldiers being hunted by ghosts, taken out one by one in ways that defied all military logic. They are using simple projectile weapons, the Admiral said, his voice tight with frustration. Just solid chunks of metal launched at incredible velocities. Our personal energy shields. They're designed to stop energy bolts and plasma fire. These metal slugs just pass straight through. But your body armor, surely, another delegate interjected. Our armor was designed to protect us from our own kind of weapons, the Admiral snapped. The humans located every single weak point, every joint, every seam, and designed their ammunition to strike those exact spots. They are neutralizing our elite soldiers with single shots to places we never even considered vulnerable. Because who would have the technology and the audacity to even try? Imagine being part of a high-tech alien army, invading a backwater planet you think is an easy win. Now, Picture your soldiers disappearing one by one, picked off by ghosts in the shadows. That was the nightmare unfolding on the Admiral's screen. If you want to hear how a simple hobby turned an entire species into the galaxy's worst nightmare, stick around for this story. The Admiral's voice was grim. They're not fighting a war. They're hunting. They're using ancient skills, the kind you'd use to track the deadliest beasts on your homeworld. A council member's voice quivered. Admiral, are you telling us this species is treating our advanced invasion force like prey? Yes, the Admiral said flatly. That's exactly what I'm saying. What? And they're scarily good at it. The room fell silent. Every single alien council member came from a world that had evolved past the brutal need to hunt for food. The thought of a species that not only kept those killer instincts, but strapped them to modern technology was something straight out of a horror movie. What are your losses, Admiral? Counselor Mari asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Admiral glanced at his data pad. As of this morning, we've lost contact with 96% of our troops on the ground. We have over 8,000 confirmed dead in just 14 days. 8,000? A crystalline delegate flashed in disbelief. In 2 weeks, yes, the Admiral confirmed, his tone heavy. And it's getting worse. They're learning from us, sharing new tactics across their planet-wide networks. But you said they treat this like a game. Surely that's a weakness? No, Counselor, it's the exact opposite, the Admiral said. Because it's a hobby they've poured centuries into perfecting the gear for it. Their hunting rifles are more precise than our military-grade blasters, because a hunter lives for that one perfect shot. Their fieldcraft is better, because they can't just rely on sensors to find their target. The screen then switched to intercepted human communications. It was just groups of regular people, casually chatting about new strategies, how to tweak their equipment, and planning where to go for their next hunt. But the most terrifying part, the Admiral emphasized, is that their culture means millions of them already have these skills. This isn't some elite special forces unit fighting us. This is their civilian population using skills they learned for fun. The Arachnid ambassador's translator relayed a single, chilling emotion. Pure, absolute dread. How many, Admiral? How many of these humans possess these recreational skills? Our most conservative estimate is around 12 million licensed hunters, all of them skilled in tracking and taking down large, dangerous animals. But other estimates suggest that their hunting culture could mean as many as 50 million people are capable of doing this. 50 million predators, Counselor Vexall whispered. 50 million civilians trained to eliminate top-level threats, the Admiral corrected, and that number doesn't even include their actual military, which, by the way, we haven't even encountered yet. The chamber exploded into chaos. The idea of 50 million civilian hunters backed up by a professional army treating an alien invasion like the opening day of deer season was unthinkable. Order, Counselor Mari yelled. Admiral, what's the status of your fleet? We still control the skies, Counselor, but we can't set a single boot on the ground without it being hunted down within hours. What do you recommend, Admiral? For his entire career, the Admiral had been a man of decisive action, but the words he was about to say went against every principle the Galactic Council was founded on.
I recommend an immediate and total withdrawal of all our forces. We send a formal apology to the human government, and we offer them an exclusive trade deal with terms so generous it'll make their heads spin. The silence in the room was deafening. Counselor Vexel spoke slowly, like he couldn't process what he was hearing. You're suggesting we apologize to a planet of primitive predators and then bribe them? I'm recommending this council admit our intelligence was dead wrong, that our standard invasion playbook is useless against them, and that any species that views a technologically superior invasion as a fun weekend sport is a threat to every single civilization in this galaxy. The Admiral leaned forward, his eyes intense. Just think about it. If humans see fighting us off as a game, what do you think they'll see interstellar expansion as, once they figure out how our ships work? The question hung in the air, heavy and cold. A species that saw invasion as a sport would see conquering the galaxy as the ultimate grand prize. How long, the arachnid ambassador hissed, before they can travel between stars? The Admiral checked his intelligence reports. Based on how fast they're learning and reverse engineering our technology, our safest guess is 30 to 50 of their years. But if they keep adapting this fast, 10 years, Counselor, maybe even less. The chamber went quiet as 43 different species all had the exact same terrifying thought: humans coming to their planets, a species that hunted apex predators for a good time, treated invaders like game, and had 50 million civilians ready to join in on the fun. Admiral, Counselor Mari said, her voice solid as a rock, begin the withdrawal, now. Send a message to the human government. Tell them the Galactic Council wishes to open diplomatic negotiations. And Admiral, make it perfectly clear that we come in peace. As the Admiral moved to formally surrender to a species they had dismissed as primitive just 3 weeks ago, he realized their entire understanding of the galaxy was about to be rewritten. Humanity wasn't just another predator. They were the ones who hunted other predators, and now they were coming for the stars. 5 years later, after what humanity called the 15-Day War, Colonel Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Earth's very first starship, the UES Persistence. He watched as alien vessels scattered like spooked deer as the human fleet arrived. He couldn't help but crack a smile at the irony. Humanity's big debut on the galactic scene looked an awful lot like a hunting party showing up at a new fishing spot. The ship's name, Persistence, wasn't a coincidence. It was humanity's oldest hunting trick. Track your target relentlessly over vast distances until it finally collapses from sheer exhaustion. Now, that same unstoppable drive was aimed at the galaxy, and everyone was learning that humans hadn't gotten any less dangerous just because their hunting grounds got bigger. Colonel, we've got a message from the lead alien ship, the comms officer said. They're asking for permission to leave the system. Morrison's smile grew wider. Permission granted. The Zephyrians were the first to learn the hard way. Never, ever treat humans like they're beneath you. After their failed invasion of Earth, they quickly became our biggest fans, desperate to stay on the good side of the species that had turned their elite soldiers into living room decorations. Let them go, Morrison commanded, and send our standard diplomatic greeting. Make it clear we're just here to check out the resources and scout a good spot for a colony, not to pick a fight. The word yet hung silently in the air, but everyone on the bridge understood.
Humanity was spreading out into the galaxy with the same quiet, focused determination they used on their most challenging hunts. It was always about watching carefully, preparing for everything, and an absolute refusal to give up once the hunt was on. The Kepler 442 system was a jackpot, with 3 planets that could potentially support human life and loaded with minerals Earth desperately needed. To make things even better, it was located right on the main trade route between 2 major alien empires. Controlling this system meant controlling who sells what to whom, and humanity was very interested in that. "Colonel," Chief Rodriguez called out from his station, "I'm detecting power signatures on the 3rd planet. Looks like someone's already living there." Morrison walked over to the main screen, his gaze locked on Kepler 442c. The planet was officially listed as barely livable. Thin air, rugged terrain, the kind of place most aliens would just ignore. But for Americans, who had been taming rough landscapes and calling them home for 400 years, it looked promising. "Life signs confirmed, sir," the science officer added. "The database has a note on them. Calls them interesting." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Give me the definition of interesting, Chief." "Well, sir, according to the files, the planet is home to a species called the Morvac. They're classified as a Class 9 predator. Super strong, highly organized into tribes, and they get extremely aggressive if you step on their turf." "Class 9, Morrison repeated, feeling that old familiar excitement start to build. "So the Galactic Council considers them a pretty big deal, huh?" "Yes, sir. The report says no other species has ever even attempted to colonize the planet because the natives are just too dangerous. Apparently, the Morvac attack anything that lands in their territory, and they couldn't care less about your fancy shields or laser cannons." Lieutenant Commander Chen looked up. "Sir, we have an urgent message coming in from the Galactic Council Command. They're warning us about the Morvac." "Put it on the main screen." The view screen lit up with the image of Counselor Thex Mari of the Crystalline Collective. Her crystalline body was flashing with light patterns that Morrison immediately recognized as a signal for panic. "Colonel Morrison," she said, skipping the formal greetings, "you need to leave the Kepler 442 system immediately. The 3rd planet is home to a predator of extreme danger that has proven impossible to defeat or negotiate with." "Counselor," Colonel Morrison said, his voice as calm as a forest on a windless day, "we appreciate the heads up, but humanity has a little experience dealing with things that have sharp teeth." She shot back, "Colonel, you aren't grasping the reality here. The Morvac aren't just predators. They're the top of the food chain. No one in this galaxy has ever gone up against them, and won. They have natural armor plating, built-in weapons, and a strategic mind that makes them deadly to anyone not from their world." Morrison glanced at the intel flooding his screen. The Morvac were impressive, all right. They were 3 meters tall, covered in armored hide, had claws that could pop out at will, and hunted in packs with a level of coordination that had stumped every species they'd ever met. Honestly, they sounded like the kind of challenge that hunters back on Earth would drive across 3 states just for a chance to face. "Counselor, what's the secret sauce? What makes them so special?" "They are persistence predators, Colonel. They will stalk their prey across unbelievable distances, using complex strategies to coordinate their attacks, and once they commit, they never, ever back down. Every single team that has ever set foot on that planet was completely wiped out.
A slow grin started to creep across Morrison's face, and he couldn't fight it. Persistence predators, huh? Counselor, I think we're having a bit of a cultural misunderstanding. When you say they hunt by chasing their prey until it literally drops from exhaustion, is that what you mean? Yes, Colonel. They are relentless trackers who never quit, and they use their pack tactics to overwhelm forces that even have better technology. I see. Morrison took a look around the bridge. Every single member of his crew had the exact same expression, a look of dawning realization. He knew they were all on the same page. Counselor, he said, drawing out the words, has anyone ever considered hunting the Morvac? A long, crackling silence filled the comms channel. It was like the idea itself was so alien, it broke the entire galactic communications network. Hunt them? Counselor Thexar's light patterns blinked in a way that screamed pure confusion. Colonel, the Morvac are the apex predators. They are not the ones who get hunted. With all due respect, Counselor, Morrison replied, a hint of laughter in his voice. Anything can be prey if you've got the right game plan. The transmission ended, leaving the frozen image of the frantic, pulsing alien on the screen. Morrison had a pretty good idea. She had just realized something terrifying. Humanity was about to remind the galaxy why they were the most dangerous species to ever build a starship. Morrison flicked on the ship-wide intercom. All right, everyone, listen up. This is the Colonel. We've made contact with a Class 9 predator down on the planet. The Galactic Council says the Morvac are aggressive, deadly, and have never been defeated by an off-world team. He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in, knowing they would travel through the fleet and all the way back to Earth, where millions of people who'd spent the last 5 years adapting their hunting skills for space were listening. Effective immediately, we are officially opening the first ever off-world hunting season. All standard Earthside hunting regulations apply, with a few tweaks for the local environment and biology. And listen, folks, our objective here isn't to wipe them out. It's to send a clear message that there's a new apex predator in town, and it's us. The roar of cheers that came back from the crew was almost deafening. This was the exact kind of crew that saw a life-or-death situation and called it a good time. The opportunity to go toe-to-toe with an alien apex predator on its home turf was the whole reason they'd joined up in the first place. Chief Rodriguez, Morrison called out, I want a full environmental and tactical breakdown of Kepler 442c. I want to know everything there is to know about these Morvac, their hunting grounds, their territories, their habits. I'm already on it, Colonel. Initial scans showed they prefer the mountain ranges and dense forests. They're persistence hunters, using incredible senses and pack coordination to wear down their targets. Perfect, Morrison said, feeling that old familiar buzz he always got before a big hunt. Just like tracking elk, only bigger, smarter, and a whole lot meaner. 6 hours later, the very first human hunting party set down on the planet's surface. Their specialized landing ship was packed with sensors built to track the most dangerous game in the most hostile environments imaginable. Morrison himself was leading the 12-person team,
carrying gear designed for this exact moment and using skills perfected in the forests and mountains back home. His team was a collection of legends. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who'd spent 30 years hunting brown bears in Alaska, Chief Petty Officer Washington, a master tracker of big cats in the jungle, and 10 others who were equal parts soldier and hunter. But more importantly, they were all Americans. They were raised with the knowledge that even the deadliest beast is just another trophy for the wall, as long as you have the right equipment, the right strategy, and the patience to wait for your shot. It only took the Morvac 6 hours to find them. Morrison's team was making their way across a wide valley when their sensors suddenly went wild. Contacts closing in from every direction, 17 Morvac, moving like a single seamless unit through terrain that should have kept them completely concealed. "We've got company," Rodriguez's voice said over the comms. "Multiple hostiles working as a team. This is classic pack behavior." Morrison looked through his rifle scope, watching the aliens move with a deadly grace. They were textbook predators, using strategies that would be unstoppable against prey that was conditioned to run. But they'd never hunted anything that was designed to hunt them right back. "We're going to run a standard elk drive," Morrison ordered in a low whisper. "Let them push us. Let them think they've got us cornered in their perfect kill zone, and then we're going to show them why you can't herd humans." The team allowed the Morvac pack to guide them, slowly falling back toward a narrow canyon, a picture-perfect ambush spot where the aliens could attack from the high ground. It was a smart trap, ideal for cornering animals that depended on their speed to escape. But Americans hunting something dangerous don't rely on speed. They rely on firepower. So what happens when the galaxy's most terrifying predators try to corner a bunch of guys who grew up hunting deer in the mountains? You're about to find out. And if you love a good story where the supposed underdog flips the script, you're going to want to see this. The assault came from 5 different directions at the same time. 17 of them, each one 3 meters of pure muscle and natural weaponry, using tactics that had shattered trained military units from across the galaxy. But they weren't up against soldiers. They were up against hunters. The whole encounter was over in less than 90 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 17 Morvac were down in the canyon, taken out by a combination of precision shots and tactical teamwork that had been passed down for generations. And the humans? They didn't have a single scratch. "Control, this is Hunter 1, Morrison said into his comlink. "First contact has been made. We read 17 confirmed kills, 0 losses," the voice from orbit responded. "Looks like the Morvac tactics are great against things that panic and run, but they fall apart against persistence predators who have better equipment." "Copy that, Hunter 1. What's your recommendation for the rest of the operation?" Morrison looked around the canyon at the results of humanity's first alien big game hunt. The Morvac were magnificent creatures, absolutely. But they made the same critical error as everyone else in the galaxy. They looked at humans and saw prey, something to be frightened and scattered. "Control, I'm recommending we proceed with full colonization," he said. "The Morvac are dangerous for sure, but they aren't hunters, not in the way we are. They don't understand coordinated tactics designed to take down a target, not just chase it. We can have permanent settlements up and running in 30 days. "We copy, Hunter 1. The colony ships are standing by."
As Morrison's team began to field dress their kills, partly for scientific study and partly because wasting good meat is a cardinal sin, he couldn't help but crack a smile. Humanity's expansion into the stars was going just like he always thought it would. We weren't conquering planets with massive armadas or superweapons. We were settling the galaxy by proving that no matter how big or scary a creature might be, it was just another day's work for a species that has spent millions of years figuring out how to be the baddest thing in any valley. 6 months down the line, the first human town, on Kepler 442c, was thriving. The rest of the Morvac population had either migrated to other continents or learned how to coexist with these weird new neighbors who treated them less like a terrifying menace and more like grizzly bears that you give a wide, respectful berth. Humans had even opened up trade with a few of the Morvac clans, swapping technology for hunting tips. But the real change was the legend that was now spreading from star to star. Every species on the Galactic Council was now aware that when humans see an apex predator, they don't see a monster to flee from. They see a new kind of game. And that one simple fact completely upended galactic military doctrine. I mean, how are you supposed to intimidate a species that looks at your fiercest warriors and just thinks, you know, that would make a great trophy for the wall? Colonel Morrison stood on the colony's main observation deck, watching children play in the very fields where those alien predators had been the undisputed rulers for millennia. He let out a soft chuckle as reports from other human colonies trickled in from all across the galaxy. Humans were spreading, not as invaders or politicians, but as the galaxy's new, undisputed top predators. We were building homes on worlds that other species wrote off as death traps, making friends by teaching them how a real hunt works, and completely rewriting the rules of interstellar power. And that's exactly what they did. The hunter teams didn't fight a war. They started a hunt. They used guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and sheer, unpredictable human ingenuity. They turned the aliens' advanced technology against them. They boarded ships, captured alien commanders, and reverse-engineered their weapons. To the Zephyrians, it was chaos. To the hunter teams, it was just another Tuesday. The galaxy learned a valuable lesson that day. Never, ever underestimate a predator that has mastered the art of hunting other predators. And the most important rule of all, when you're dealing with humans, you are never the hunter. You are always the prey. And sooner or later, hunting season always begins.